Europe composed symphonies, painted cathedrals of light, and somewhere besides the violin, it intonated the smoke of crematoriums.
Civilization seems strange. The same hand that writes poetry can also design a more efficient way to disappear people.
The body adventurers?
Welcome to Human Bubble Podcast, where Plato shares snacks with the weekend and Schopenhauer gets lost in a Spotify playlist. In our freaky studio where cats knocking things over.
We explore the chaos of being human through art, books, music, and philosophy, like a brainy fever dream with good lightnings. Strap in, it's weird, it's wise, and it's probably cheaper than therapy. Nasi, when people think about Europe, we imagine orchestras, cathedrals, philosophy, literature, a civilization that stood proudly beneath chandeliers discussing morality, progress for the future of mankind, and honestly, that's what makes this even more disturbing to me. Because humanity mastered music, mastered architecture, mastered science, and eventually it mastered death itself. And the 20th century did not merely witness war, it witnessed modernity weaponized. Factories no longer existed only to manufacture prosperity. Railways no longer existed merely to connect cities. Industries, science, administration, all those great achievements of civilization slowly begin to turn towards something darker. Something systematic because the Second World War was not merely chaos, it was administration, logistic, industry, efficiency. That was organized like machinery, and honestly, Nessie, I think that's what makes it terrifying. Don't you think? Nessie, like even
Yeah,
today,
indeed. Hmm.
mm-hmm, right? Like even today, not simply the scale of destruction, but actually a precision of it. I came across this phrase, Nessie, it struck me so deep inside. Ancient wars killed through rage. Modern wars learned to kill systematically. Numbers replaced names, paperwork replaced morality. Somewhere in the middle of all of this machinery, humanity convinced itself that extermination could become a damn procedure. All right, Nessie, I've got a question for you.
Oh, that's intriguing.
Yeah, brace yourself. So, suppose humanity decides to erase an entire race of existence of the face of Earth, not by murder, but actually erase completely. But here's the catch. How do you exterminate millions of people while leaving behind as little evidence as possible? Because eventually, you see, that became the question Europe tried to answer, and the answer humanity created was terrifying.
Yeah, I want to answer this in the spirit of Tadeusz Borowski, with a slight pinch of irony, because perhaps it needs to be said clearly. Gas chambers were invented by a genius, a human genius, someone intelligent enough to design a system capable of exterminating millions of people almost without a trace. Almost. Because traces remain in the air, in the soil that absorbed years of suffering, in rivers carrying ash in memory, our memory.
Mm-hmm.
And Darkster and
Yeah.
listeners, perhaps also somewhere beyond language itself, in the weight history leaves on humanity. I strongly believe that we cannot forget it. We cannot. It was human beings who did this to other human beings, the cruelest animal in the world.
was shown to see the cruelest animals in the world. Humanity created poetry, opera, philosophy, and gas chambers. And you know what? What's horrifying to see? Under Adolf Hitler's extermination was no longer fantasy, whispered in hatred. It became organized, calculated, industrial. The camps were not built by demons, they were built by engineers, architects, accountants, guards, clerks, ordinary people following procedures. And honestly, I think that's the true horror of the Holocaust. Not monsters hiding in darkness, but civilization itself functioning without conscience.
Yeah, you said something very crucial about European civilization. Yes, yes, museums, operas, theaters, philosophy, and breathtaking art. Alongside them, the perfected art of killing. That is probably the most terrifying paradox of the 20th century. Imagine just the same civilization that created symphonies in cathedrals also engineered concentration camps with almost mathematical precision. You mentioned that. Like,
Yeah,
culture,
exactly.
yeah, culture did not save humanity from barbarism. Perhaps it only made barbarism more sophisticated. And here I want to quote Tadeusz Borowski. Let
Oh,
me go
all
with the
right.
quote.
Go ahead.
Yeah, let me find the page quickly. Yeah, I'm here. Okay, this is from one of his stories, camp stories. You know how much I used to like Plato? Today I realize he lied, for the things
Oh,
of this world are not a reflection of the ideal, but a product of human sweat, blood, and hard labor. It is we who built pyramids, hewed the marble for the temples and the rocks for the imperial roads. We were filthy and died real deaths. What does ancient history say about us? We rave over the extermination of the Etruscans, the destruction of Carthage, over treason, deceit, plunder, Roman law. Yes, today too there is a law. So it's all about how easily we overinterpret words, overinterpret, hmm, and
yeah.
how dangerously philosophy can be misunderstood. That's the thing. One man, you mentioned the name. I don't want to do it again,
Yeah.
but everyone knows uh, who is the guy, who is the genius. An ordinary Medicare man took the Nietzschean idea of higher and lower individuals and transformed it into a monstrous ideology. In reality, Friedrich Nietzsche never created Nazism,
Yep, he
but
never did.
his concepts were politically distorted, twisted into something almost unrecognizable. It makes me wonder how careful we should be with semantics, with language itself.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm. The Übermensch became racial propaganda, an obsession with purity, hierarchy, and perfection. Well, and just imagine how frighteningly easy it is to convince people that another human being is no longer worthy of life. All you need is the right rhetoric, expressive enough, emotional enough, and suddenly the greatest lie in a history begins to sound like truth. Maybe that's the most terrifying thing. Not evil itself, but how persuasive it can become. And honestly, uh, I have no doubt that the world, in some sense, resembles one enormous concentration camp, exactly as Tadeusz Borowski suggested. A place structured by invisible hierarchies, obedience, humiliation, and the constant division between those who possesses power and those reduced to numbers. human beings always want someone to stand below them because it comforts their own mediocrity.
True. I agree that, Nessie. I still remember the moment I stumbled upon the pages of This Way for the Gas Ladies and Gentlemen. That's the story's name, actually. Book's name, even. That's a book name, even. I'm sorry. So, as I keep reading, something about it stayed with me. It was heavy in a way that's difficult to explain, difficult to fathom, even. Sleep became harder, my thoughts became darker, and even after putting the book down, the images never really left my mind. And actually, when I started looking deeper into Auschwitz concentration camp itself, the visuals became even more disturbing because this place still exists, Nessie, today as a museum. This the evidence is still there.
Yeah, and I am very convinced that everyone should go there and just everyone should visit that place. It's like, the must in 21st century.
I do agree because these evidences are specifically for those people, those who still to this day they choose to not accept the fact or believe it that something horrifying even happened in the world. So when you walk through those buildings, one of those first things you will see is a pile of stretched shoes, like stretching endlessly behind the glass. Men's shoes, women's shoes, children's shoes. It's a mountain, Nessie. I watched the documentary, and this guy was walking in an alley of that big one house, sorry, and both sides of him there were millions of shoes. And when you walk further, you see the luggage of people that brought with them, with their names still written on them, because they were instructed to label their belongings before entering the camp, as if they could one day return for them. And then comes the prosthetics, countless prosthetics, Nasi, artificial legs, crutches, supports, silent evidence of people who arrived there already were struggling to survive. And you keep walking from there, the room is filled with bowls and cups, endless everyday objects from ordinary life that suddenly ended there. And that room is massive. And then you see there was his Zyklon B canisters, the same chemical containers used inside the gas chambers. And that's the
Hmm.
reality of this place being to sink in, begins to sink.
Yeah, and yeah, to sink in. Borowski wrote in one of his camp stories that Cyclone B was great to kill insects and people. Just imagine, this simile, insects and people, bugs and people. How people they were reduced to such position. But yeah, that's just the impression when you are talking about that. It's touching, but it shouldn't be only touching. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what was that? It was my
Mhm.
cat.
You can't.
I'm sorry.
Ah, the
There's
one
some
we have on
spirit behind.
Instagram.
Maybe Borowski's spirit somewhere. Oh my god.
Ooh.
Yeah, my mobile phone just fall down, and it was because my cat, my red ginger cat.
Ginger cat always won the naughty ones.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So yeah, I think not it's not about touching, but to remember, to not repeat those things. But it's so close, I believe.
Yeah,
When you just observe today's word, you can find out that it's so easy to repeat the same thing.
exactly. I'm going to continue this little journey of that place. So, there was also an execution wall where thousands were shot, many after being forced to strip naked before their death. And nearby stood the gallows where multiple prisoners were publicly hanged at once, as fear itself became a part of the system, Nessie. And honestly, I think that's what genuinely disturbs me the most about Auschwitz. Not only the violence of or death itself, but how ordinary everything slowly became inside those walls. People still woke up, stood in the lines, searched for food, carried bodies, and somewhere continued surviving while surrounded by smoke, fear, and starvation. Borowski doesn't describe the camp like some dramatic nightmare filled with non-stop chaos. No, he shows routine, repetition, a world where horror slowly becomes natural and normal. Now, see, inside those camps, people were reduced to numbers, as you have said. Labor and survival instinct, hunger and fear changed people. Morality itself became unstable. Sometimes survival demands silence, sometimes indifference, and sometimes even cruelty. And maybe that's why Borowski's writing still feels unbearable, even today, because he forces us to confront how frighteningly adaptable human beings can become, even in the middle of unimaginable horror, Nessie.
Mhm. I want to talk a little bit about the author, about Borowski, but let me start with the quote from this amazing introduction.
Oh, another quote we
The
have.
quote
Okay.
is, Borowski's Auschwitz stories, however, are not only a masterpiece of Polish and award literature. Among the tens of thousands of pages written about the Holocaust and the death camps, Borowski's slender book continues to occupy, for more than a quarter century now, a place apart. The book is the one of the cruelest of testimonies to what man did to men, and a pitiless verdict that anything can be done to a human being. Yeah, so in this introduction to the stories, you can
Hmm.
read about the real European education of the author.
Yeah,
Tadeusz
exactly.
Borowski mhm, was a young Polish intellectual and poet whose life belonged more to history and literature than even to himself. A tragic fate of a tragic generation. He was arrested during World War II in Warsaw simply because he was looking for Maria, his fiancée,
Yeah,
who had
I
not
know.
returned. Yeah, it was that
That was,
time,
yeah, so tragic time, Nessie.
and of course we have to mention that she was in a concentration camp as well because she was
Mm-hmm.
arrested first, and then was
Yeah.
Borowski, and they both were transported to the Auschwitz and Birkenau. So, he appeared in an apartment already being watched by the Germans. So, imprisoned first in Auschwitz, later in Dachau, Borowski wrote some of the most extraordinary and horrifying stories ever created about the human race. His prose strips humanity bare, without illusion, without sentimentally. That's what I like the most about his writing.
Yeah.
So he survived the camps physically, but psychologically, he never truly escaped them. In the edition of the book we linked below the recording, there is an introduction written by Jan Kott, and this introduction helps us understand the shadow hanging over Borowski's life and the reasons behind his tragic end. Tragic end. You know, it's absurd. The author of the camp stories committed suicide only 5 years after being released, as if, you know how to say that, as if some experiences never really ends. Well, in these stories, Borowski destroys the romantic image of victimhood.
Mm-hmm.
You said about that as well. Like he describes more routine, right? This routine of camps. It's kind of, you know, the new approach. It was a new approach at the time. So about the victimhood, in
Hmm.
his stories, victims can become cruel. Survival itself becomes morally disturbing, and camp reality corrupts everyone. So, in Borowski's prose, humanity does not disappear dramatically. It erodes slowly, quietly, and practically as a routine, as you said. Yeah.
As a routine, indeed.
Yeah. And you shared your emotions and the influence of his stories when you
Oh, yeah.
yeah when
I
you were reading.
honestly, Nasi, I've
Hmm.
never been affected by something so easily. But
Hmm.
as I shared, I was deeply affected.
Yeah, because of the topic, but not only the topic itself, right?
Hmm.
There's the language, the way of writing, but I'm going to talk about it in our next episodes.
Yeah, indeed.
You know, the same. I want to share my point of view about it. Like I remember my first encounter with the poetry, because he was a great poet as well, and prose of Tadeusz Borowski. It felt like being struck directly in the face, in the mind, and somewhere deeper in that invisible place inside the heart. Hmm. I can feel it now, even. After reading him, I kept dreaming about roads made of stone, screams, fear, endless hiding, and strangely enough, his stories are not even written in an overtly emotional way, as we said. There is no dramatic ornament, no sentimental attempt to force compassion. And perhaps that is exactly why they are so devastating, because Borowski doesn't scream, he
Yeah,
observes.
yeah,
Hmm. And that quietness becomes unbearable.
indeed.
So, next time, we want to unfold this story. This way for the gods, ladies and gentlemen. Even the title has a lot of irony.
Of course,
But
we're gonna talk about this afterwards.
yeah, yeah. But to read it with true understanding, we first need to confront the reality of the concentration camps. That's the first thing, and that monstrous idea born in some diseased mind a long time ago. Yeah,
Exactly, you see. And before we move on to the next episode and discuss about this way for the gas, ladies and gentlemen, I'd encourage everyone to read two things. First, the introduction, especially from page 13 to 28, it gives important context about Borowski, his life, and the world behind those stories. Second, the story itself. This way for the gas, ladies and gentlemen. We'll leave the links to the complete book below, amongst an animated adaptation and the survivor testimony from Auschwitz. Because what we've discussed today is dark history. What Borowski showed us, what it looked like from the inside. So take some time with the introduction, read the story, and join us in the next episode.
yeah. And listener, we have a surprise for you, but we will talk about that later. So stay tuned.